Hello, and welcome to my lovely, inspiring human potential community. To everyone tuning in, before we get started on today's topic, that is in pursuit of those keys to inner growth and following your heart to the life of an entrepreneur, and to much more that I talk about, guide about, from the podcast to the blog to other online presences which are known to those who continuously tune in. Special announcement: Anchor has allowed finally that listener support button, which means the world for everything that I pursue and wanting to share, and for those who are looking to support the inspiring human potential mission, its purpose, and anyone who believes in general in inspiring human potential, because that's one of those amazing things we can do, and the online world has brought us to be able and do connect, support, and together we will achieve that harmony worldwide. So if you wish to contribute because the inner growth process mindset has contributed to your life, or because you believe in inspiring the world through these different means, please do so. Thank you so much for doing so. And as always, you can reach out if you want to collaborate, if you want to share your story, if you have a personal development process mindset, something that can contribute to others in their unlocking of their untapped, unlimited potential. Reach out to me. The blog, luna12780.com, has my email in the About section. And let's move on to today's topic. As always, the lovely online community has at heart us online entrepreneurs, content creators. We have many different names, but we are all here to inspire human potential in our unique way. And for the inspiring human potential community, we have new podcast patron members only episodes coming this year, because Patreon has started something to support the podcast community, and we are going to use that in a way that expands the inner growth learning material and the ability for you to follow your heart, applying the things that we discuss in our daily Anchor IHP podcast show. So inner growth mindset, lifestyle choices, the journey, the way that you can work through anything that is arising at first as conflict, but that those who tune into any of the material, whether the podcast, the blog, or the website, know that's the opportunity for inner growth and for you to follow your heart. So I look forward to hearing from you all for this first round. It'll be the first year that we have patron members only podcast episodes. With your feedback, I'm sure we will continue to improve and expand all the material that is meant to inspire your higher human potential. I look forward to you joining us. Before we begin today's topic, I would like to share a bit about the foundation of all of the inspiring human potential inner growth content. What you learn about and what we discuss has its foundation in a lifelong accumulated research that involves the fields of humanities and social sciences, philosophy with a focus on existentialism, and recently added basics of neuroscience, physiology, and biology. This research continues, and the wealth of information that I share across different platforms is in the effort to support your inner growth, self-empowerment, conscious living, ascension, awakening, and personal development journey in a way that allows you to understand the distinct human characteristics involved in your day-to-day and overall life, alongside the choices you make, how you feel, and deal with events such as the unknown and unwanted. A simplified breakdown, just to give you an idea, and for the IHP community to keep in mind as you pursue inner growth and self-empowerment, is what is involved in the human's response to day-to-day events and life happening. We have been able to review this, and we always review some aspects throughout the episodes and all the content. 1, the body's nervous system's defense mechanism, flight, fight, response. 2, the heart's feelings, emotions, ego, self-response. 3, the mind's conscious, subconscious, and conscious response alongside the established neural pathways, societal culture and knowledge filters, identity, secondary and primary consciousness aspects. This and more is what is involved as you tune into and read the IHP content, whether it be on the blog, the YouTube channel, patron membership site, or the website itself, or the podcast. You will always get to learn something about how to apply an inner growth mindset and lifestyle approach, how to follow your heart and lead with it with that unconditional love, neutrality that we so much discuss, why it's important. And all of this allows you to tap into that infinite higher human potential, which is also a response that one acquires as a body, mind, and heart that is one within you with that ownership. Even though I'm only 41, pretty much my entire life I've had to battle when I talk about humanity with their infinite higher human potential in mind and them being loving human beings, even when they're quote-unquote bad. And side note, yes, as a child, just like any other child, I was following the rules. In fact, like by the book, definitely by the book. But my heart always stood in a place of love. And thanks to Jesus and God, it was taught to me to not cast that stone, don't judge a book by its cover, all of those things, and to turn the other cheek to help humanity. At a certain point, I knew what I wanted to be and do when I grew up. I wanted to help humanity. And that's where the journey to where we are at today began. Little did I know that it had everything to do with ego. And when I say ego, I mean our own ego, because every human being has one. And it makes complete sense when I think of those descriptions that my mother gives me of how I was as a child. Very stubborn, still am stubborn, because I've always known what I wanted in life. I've always known what I needed to do. And the only short time that I didn't listen to what I knew was best was that fraction of a half a year, not even, of the teenage year, which when we go and study psychology, they explain it quite well. The ego self of every individual in the subconscious and conscious level is looking outside of itself. And so by the time you become a teenager, you are not looking to your adult people as the ones, but to your peers. Now here's where personally I differentiated from other individuals. I looked up to leadership, quote unquote, to people that were older and supposed to be wiser and telling me which was the right or wrong path. So here's bad, good. And in fact, though, questions arose that I started seeking out answers to on my own, because the battle with the unconditional love and being able to achieve a space where humanity and the world would get along was not something I gave up on, even though with political science, international relations, and diplomacy, it became very clear that there's a lot of compromise. And these aspects were interesting because I was never going to compromise my soul, my heart, the unconditional love that I was taught when I was little, that resonated and that spoke true from the first psychology book I read. In fact, that's where I'll never forget. Wow, so I'm spot on when I say those who are not unconditionally loving have ego issues. And I hadn't used that term, obviously. For me, it was simply clear that there is a subconscious and conscious, there's hurt. We're all human beings. We all know by the time we get to a certain age that we've all had experiences and our environment influences us. This is where it's common sense. The part that doesn't get brought to our attention is in fact the part that leadership slowly, as I acquired information within human behavioral realms, so the social sciences and humanities, it became clear that the system was not actually doing what was right for all human beings. And this is, again, from a perspective of a person who, when I said I want to help humanity, is about your heart, your ego, your inner growth, to allow you to become yourself, empowered, believing in yourself. And I kept feeling the hurt, the insecurity of the ego self of the people around me. Yesterday I told you a story. We're going to use that story again today, because this topic, transcending bad, heals. It heals you, because you are actually going to move beyond your own self-judgment, but it also heals the way you're looking at the world, because as those who tune in regularly know, once you are empowered truly from the ego self, you're no longer responding with a specific defense mechanism that is the first nervous system's response to side engagement, seeking approval or giving disapproval or not. Like, there's a specific level of maturity, because you go from being an infant, you're an infant until you start and continue to react to situations in life with non-flow. Now, everybody's going to talk about this in a different way, and here's where what I share, and with the Inner Growth Mindset, the book, the program, it is to create independent individuals who are already inclined to be independent. In other words, you're doing already your own inner growth. You know you don't need to be told what to do or not to do, because you know your life. There's a specific type of heart at hand. The question of the love with humanity is because the majority, that mass that is speaking and that is highlighted, are led by a specific specific reactive nervous system, this part of looking to each other. As the existentialists put it, they're using the past and they're using what they could see versus taking responsibility and saying, no, I stand up for unconditional love, I stand up for every human being and I stand up for knowing that this is an outcome that is possible. And here's where the neuroscience, really, it's like math for me, neuroscience, and I'm taking this master course on trauma, and I'm going to share with you a couple of aspects that are very important. So here's where the common sense doesn't have this. The psychologists don't have the common sense in pop psychology, which is what's popular, so what the mass is following. And even when I tune into specific types of spiritual leaders, they're not talking about the neuroscience either. They're not talking about the physiological breakdown, and they're in fact not saying use your consciousness to be aware of ego and then start tending to, every time you have a sissy fit, excuse me for the terminology, because this is where this is an expression, but where you're acting out capriciously, we'll use that. And here's where people will justify those capricious feelings based on societal knowledge, based on their ego-based leadership, which has given them very specific terminology to continue this type of behavior. And here's where, again, it's only by choice that a person would even transcend this idea of duality, which is why the title, I wasn't sure how I was going to write it, but then I said, I want the beginning to be about transcending bad, because this is the place attracting and building a community of those who want to inspire human potential, and not those who are in ego and judging human potential. Because the ones who are in ego and judging, they're going to say you can't transcend bad. They're going to say this concept is BS. You can't be neutral. Like the one person I had that, well, it wasn't even a conversation. It was more her not being able to accept that a human being said, yeah, I'm neutral towards any type of person. Tell me whatever you want. You're not going to change my answer. This is the part where the neuroscience in this mastery course is like when I first read the psychology book that I said, see, I knew it. People are loving, and when they're not, they're hurt. Now I've got physiological confirmation. Yesterday they talked about the memories that are impacted and how they're impacted by trauma. And this is where there's 4 memories. There's 2 basic breakdowns, explicit memory and implicit memory. The explicit memory has 2 segments, and the implicit 2. So the explicit memory has semantic, which is when you're recalling memory, so the language, general knowledge. Episodic is the second, that's autobiographical This is where you have specific experiences which have an emotional attachment, and this is where you find purpose in your life and direction. And it's where, in fact, those who have been through specific types of trauma, and they really make it clear that we all have a level of trauma. This is a thing. Even the other day when we reviewed the different types of attachment, they say you can have secure attachment. Doesn't mean you don't have trauma, because there's still going to be something that you possibly had to, in the time of the emotional brain hemisphere developing, your flight fight, the way you sense something, your body did not wasn't able to take it all in. And so the trauma is caused by an overwhelming emotion that is not manageable by the body. So at the end of the day, when we do look at each other, in fact, for me, when I look at all the people that are not really paying attention to when they're in non-flow, when they're reacting with societal engagement, their ego's first response, insecurity, which they have not talked about, but Basil van der Kolk, the Body Keeps the Scorebook author, and he is a psychiatrist and neuroscientist. He's on this panel of experts. I can't wait till I do the other 2 courses I have, but he hasn't mentioned it yet either. What I was trying to say is societal engagement, the minute you're justifying yourself with that common knowledge is the minute you're still in an ego space. And that's exactly what gets justified by the different generalized statements, which the mass, that's why we have a mass consumer, mass people. The majority of people are using their following, basically. And even those who talk about humanity as sheep are not any different, because in fact they're using the same cliche sentences. The differentiating individuals are not spending their time doing what you would find in mass. In fact, they're the ones doing completely unique things. Now, the experts are accumulating the information that allow those people who are in a space of neutrality and therefore always innovating to do things, and that's what leads to next steps. The mass will follow. Essentially, the mass always follows, because they're waiting, like the economical ball curve. Once it's adapted by majority, that's where it's that truth. The same time, though, there's also, to be neutral and fair, the evolution of our species is about consciousness. And so right now with technology, it's thanks to that we have insights to neuroscience, insights to the way the nervous system works, insights to the gut, insights to all of this. So it's not because the 4D space right here, the conspiracy theorist people will address the system as trying to keep you down. There are many different groups that will express specific belief systems, and here we don't negate any information for anyone who's new. However, we try to stay grounded and here we're talking about becoming yourself as a human being, a person, pursuing inner growth, following your heart. The tangible aspect of being a human means you have an ego, a nervous system, and you have the brain is what you're using to think it through. So I do the best of my ability to include the human elements, and we have been starting to bring spiritual elements, because the concepts do relate to the findings, particularly in the new science. Like when I say ascension in this 5-dimension, 4-dimension, 3-dimension, the quantum physics realm talks about it, and there is some inclusion. For some material, you'll find the inclusion of belief systems. For others, you'll simply find the mathematical breakdown. At the same time, this is where the empowered ego self, an empowered individual, is not reacting with cognitive dissonance, meaning it's not that any new information is going to make you feel that you need to defend yourself. That's a closed-minded person. There are many of those, and there are even those who would not consider themselves closed-minded. I personally don't consider myself closed-minded, but I get told that I'm closed-minded all the time when somebody comes and mansplains to me something about my life, and I reply back to them that I don't need their input, that I'm living the life I want to live. So you see here, if we want, there are many different ways that we can address and use terminology. It is from neutrality and simply allowing yourself to say, what am I and how do I want to receive, and interact with information, and to understand that anytime you are reacting to information defensively, you are being closed-minded to that information. While when I'm getting information from people who think they know the one truth, so they're basically, again, mansplaining to me, they're not sharing, because see, if somebody's sharing with me, these types of comments don't take place. When somebody's sharing, we're all talking. When somebody's trying to tell you something and they're not listening to you, they're different conversations. The empowered person, those who want to achieve a specific journey, you learn how to simply stand your ground, and sometimes you also learn to allow the closed-minded individual to speak up and say their piece, because their ego needs it more than your ego. Because their ego is that insecure that they have decided they're going to get into debate with another human being. Really, it's because their ego is in fear space. The one woman who badgered me with questions, her body was reacting with fear because the information being shared by another human being was not accepted. It was not possible. It defied every single one of those societal norms with bad and good. And then they also somehow thought that I was saying don't send them to prison and let everybody be, free. And at the same time, once I understood that at a certain point, I was like, well, I mean, if that was the way the world went, then it went that way. Either way, this is the space when you don't have fear, which is what happens once you get into a 5D space with your mind, because the unconditional love and light that they speak of when it comes to 5D, and they call it Christ consciousness, it's because definitely Jesus is the example of unconditional love. I mean, I'm honored that, but I also understand logically speaking why that is. And while others that are still in that duality, some react negatively to this, some react excessively in another realm. And here's where staying grounded, science, as always, is going to catch up to share with us that visibility. Not because of anything except for people need to see to believe. Societal engagement. It's always going to be the first nervous system's response. It's the person who starts to become aware that they have an ego, they have a nervous system, and when they're in non-flow, that's a defense mode. It's the person who stops wanting to be in sissy fits and or the other word that I chose to use, which now I can't remember, but I could remember that one. This is hilarious. Oh gosh, contentious? No. Anyways, point is, it's the person who's open to recognizing I am an ego right now. Let me take a step back and calm myself. The personally experience, for example, when I was being told by my mother and anybody, you're too aggressive, you're closed-minded, you're stubborn, I would take a look and see what they were saying, but on my own, not with them. And this is the part that people that are empowered will do. It's not to discount other individuals, which is what I share with those I love. I'm not discounting your thought and what you're sharing, but you're not the only truth. You're not the only information out here. And this is that space where when you're open to all information and you've stopped reacting to anything new with cognitive dissonance, you will achieve this space too. So transcending that bad is about transcending this concept from your person and the external. So transcending bad with neutrality, it is about you being in the cosmic consciousness, exploring the secondary and primary consciousness in that transcendent function way that Carl Jung speaks of. So you're not judging, you're not condemning. You're not condemning any thought, any feeling. You're giving yourself the opportunity to explore. And this is where being able to allow you to treat the ego as part of you versus thinking of it as I need to transcend and only be connected to my higher consciousness. I need to get rid of my ego and go through the layer bad ego. It's the negative connotation that sometimes is ascribed to ego through other aspects that do help. Don't support you in becoming your whole person with an empowered ego. They support you in using the external, and so therefore having still societal engagement. It's only according to these 10 labels, check boxes, and lists that I am empowered. This is the difference. As long as you need the outside to tell you you're empowered, it's like when the existentialists say a person will not assume the responsibility, because then that means they're defining the entire human species. And they say what a responsibility, but the reality is it's our physical nervous system's immediate response. From the moment you're born, you're looking outside, give me the input of sense of comfort, sense of security. And even if that is taking place, depending on the adult that is doing that and on your way of sensing that, if it felt secure or not, you're going to have an organized memory about that. So here, the explicit and implicit memory, let's finish that. So for the episodic, this is where if you are not given specific types of input as you're growing up, you're not able to develop a sense of self, of reality, of direction. And in fact, that's where it creates an issue, because a person doesn't know what their meaning is. And they talk about this very much. I didn't take specific notes about it, but keep that in mind for your own journey, since all of you who are tuning in are doing this in a way that allows you to go through that process. Because at the end of the day, it's your subconscious. It's your primary consciousness and secondary consciousness. You are within your mind. The minute I'm giving you some information on how physiologically speaking, there's defense mechanisms in place from the moment you're zero, it's the moment that you have the possibility to transcend this word bad in all cases with neutrality. Allow yourself to heal. And this is where it's about self-love, but it is also about love towards the external, towards those parents, towards the environment, towards all the stimuli, all the memories that come up. So when they were talking about this episodic memory, they gave an example, I believe it was this one, where they gave an example of a teacher, one of the doctors, that scared them, but that they remember having learned a lot from that moment. And it reminded me of the one story I tell you guys all the time, where I went to my professor, it was 4th grade, and I asked them to tell the class that I had scoliosis and to explain to them what I have, because the kids had started a rumor, particularly this one little girl, about my guts falling out, and that's why I was wearing a back brace. Now, my feelings weren't hurt from what I recollect, but I did go to the adult expecting to be supported. And they didn't. They put me in front of the class and made me give a presentation. To this day, I don't have a fond memory of that moment. I have a memory of, okay. And this made me think of when we talked yesterday about the avoidant attachment, when they said, some people that have avoidant attachment, they didn't get what they needed as they were growing up, and so now they're not going to need anything from anybody. And I can say that probably for most of the parts, because of looking up to leadership, not being given full-on information, for example, on humanity, but being told, don't ask so many questions. Not being supported when I'm asking the adult to take a stand and give information. So, okay, again, being put on the spot. So, yeah, I don't need anybody, because at those crucial times, this is what was presented to me. However, so here, I'm giving you an example. You all could be thinking about aspects of your past, and that's these neuroscientists, they help their patients that way. But here's where the person who's perhaps pursuing inner growth on their own and is in that space of being able to be neutral towards yourself and humanity, you can achieve a relationship with those feelings, and that's how you heal. You transcend, but it does require the neutrality with that word bad. So when we look at bad, before we keep moving forward, bad is defined as failing to reach an acceptable standard, unfavorable, morally objectionable, mischievous, disobedient, inadequate, or unsuited to a purpose, disagreeable, unpleasant. There's one thing that I would say is bad for real, is when somebody is attacking, physically speaking, another human being. And here's where somebody would say, well, what about countries? And in fact, when I studied political science, I questioned. I said, I don't know if this is how I'm going to help people. I don't want to, and I can't condone war. There's no reason for me to condone this. It goes completely against unconditional love and against all of humanity. So when I say all of humanity, I do mean it. That's the part. It's not just part of humanity. All of humanity, every life form deserves to live. Neuroscience has given me the spot on proof for that, which is why yesterday, if you guys tuned in, you know exactly why it's important for us to choose love. Because some people, they're afraid of love. You smile at them, they have a horrible memory. Something happened to them where they were smiled at and then beaten to death, maybe, by an abusive parent, and you think of them as some awful human being. That's the part. And we all have some places that we're not given sense of security. So attachment, for example, it's a lot of different experiences. Again, even if you have had a secure household, they express it themselves because trauma is experienced when something overwhelms the senses. We all have these moments. If there's a moment of confusion, the worst case scenario are the ones who become disorganized, disorganization attachment. They're the ones who only take what they want from people. They cannot manage their emotions because they couldn't trust their emotions when they were little, because they were getting confused inputs from the parent, who maybe one day would hug them, maybe the rest of the 10 days would beat them or just ignore them. Not to mention their emotional body, their nervous system's response was going from the societal engagement, the flight fight, and eventually freeze pause, complete numbness, because that's the only way the body's going to be able and survive, is to not feel, because obviously feeling is not, cortisol hurts the body. It goes through the brain and the adrenaline through the kidneys. So we've been learning and sharing a little bit about this because this is where it's about our bodies, guys. Mindfulness, by the way, is what they also talk about, and it's the same way when we say bring to your attention your body. Very interesting, because procedural is where the body comes into place. So they say, they gave a very good example. Somebody who had a dictatorship type style, like being expected to be always on point by parents. And I have a bunch of military friends, so it made me think of all of my military friends who definitely have this rigid position, and obviously without generalization, but they make it very clear that rigid position of a body. This is part of that procedural memory. So you've been taught to have to meet expectations. You're going to be in a specific stance, which causes a specific type of hormonal from within your body. It's not only a posture. Your entire demeanor, your entire way is that. And that rigidity does not allow a sense of ease. So when people think about life and think about achieving well-being, the popular science, which is what the mass is still consuming, and right now, luckily, there's meditation, mindfulness, conscious living space, because the average is not the one going to the specialized neuroscientists, which would be ideal for every human to go to them. And even they, as a team, though, what they're doing, why it's free, is to help people to acquire this information. And in fact, I love it. They say when you help someone heal, you change the course of the world. And that's what we get to do, guys, not only with our own person, for those who are part of the community and you're pursuing inner growth and you're empowering your ego, but then you're also going to go and empower other individuals. Unconditional love, it's not a concept of peace and love, everybody thinking the same. Unconditional love is actually having the understanding to know you're not the only human around, and all other humans are humans like you, and that we have been experiencing for many years in our human evolution violence. So our nervous system's response is inclined with the societal engagement as the first response, because as mammals, when we first began from what we know, we were not the strongest species without our tools and weapons. Until we created fire, we were in danger with nature. When we created fire from the gut documentary, we freed up some energy from the gut, and which is our first brain. We also learned that not only from the gut documentary, that one and the other one, but also recently when I was talking with Tina, the most recent spiritual and human element bringing together video. What was it called? We talked about energy therapies and naturopathy. It's on the podcast or the YouTube channel if you guys want to check that out. And she shares that one of her Tai Chi instructors or an author of Tai Chi or some if it's not Tai Chi, it's the other one that I can't remember the name. And that this person went to the science lab to say, here, I want you to prove this. They didn't want hypotheticals or people not to believe what they were talking about, but they are able to use their gut and their brain. Both are brains. And here's where our brain developed from the moment we created fire, and it in fact developed from the bottom up. The reptilian brain is at the bottom, then we continued to build the rest of the brain. I'm not sure of the exact sequence. All I know is that the rational brain hemisphere, our thinking brain, is the youngest part of the brain. Now, I share with you guys, and I know the community hears this a lot, but community, we need to let others who are new know about this, because the body has everything to do with everything. And that reaction, which is described as monstrous, as evil, as with all the stories and all the tales, which are concepts, there are parts still of societal knowledge and culture. Still to this day, experts are using that same verbiage in their documentaries on criminals, on anything that is not in the arena of good, but that is in the arena of bad, in the absence of this new information, which is being slowly distributed. But the focus is obviously with clinicians. These are all professors. So the academia world of neuroscience knows. The psychology, maybe, where if you get an ego-based person who's only going to stick to what they know, their old way, which is the true way, because that was proven, this is poppycock, they're reacting not only with cognitive dissonance, but they have a whole group of people that are saying, nah, this person's an expert, they know what they're talking about. And here's where that specific 5D space, not everybody gets to this infinite higher human potential, and so not being afraid of new information and saying, even though there is a bad and good for me, I get it. I get what it means to transcend bad with neutrality, because here the concept exists for a reason. So when I was saying what's bad to me is somebody who goes and impacts on purpose somebody else's life, but impacts in a very, when I say impacts, I don't mean like go and have an argument. I mean like you go out of your way to destroy their life. This has no person that I know has had this. TV shows all the time, for heaven's sake. Hypotheticals, oh yeah, you can go and talk to people that will say, oh, that person, this is what they're doing it on purpose. I know that's egocentric. You think that people are really that into you. Like, sometimes it can happen, but here's where the thing, if you keep on thinking that way, you're using your brain power, and you're actually using your lovely sharp tool that could be used for your growth, for your life, to analyze a hypothetical with this feeling of really not trust, not beautiful feeling at all. And you're interrogating and doing hypotheses on another human being, on other people. And here's where it gets me, though, because obviously when I'm watching movies, especially older movies, which I watched one yesterday, but even the new movies, that battlefield is always there. That's where there's just societal engagement. There's just different ego mind and ego spiritual based group leaders and people, the ones who have transcended. So some of you are tuning in and others are not tuning in, but they're out there. They're in neutrality. They know exactly what it means to transcend bad, because bad is a concept, but bad, there has to be the intent, but an intent to the extreme of, okay, let me understand. You're actually going out of your way, using your energy, using everything to get to that person. When you see that, even if you do, you know that person's not very well, that they're obviously ill, meaning that they have some major hurt, if all they can pay attention to is ruining one person's life or intervening in somebody's life like that. The average of what bad is always very much ego, societal knowledge based. It's based on concepts and labels. The same way the person, when I said just the word neutrality, they immediately, well, wait a minute, no, but what about the person who steals? No, well, what about the person who kills? Oh no, what about the person who does drugs and is dealing drugs? They gave me all these names. I'm like, it doesn't matter. I don't judge the human being. I don't judge the human being. I don't throw that stone, which in this group setting, by the way, they were all gossiping prior to this conversation about their colleagues. Now I ask you, that is very common. And see, here's where some people would be judging that entire group. All I knew was that entire group resonates and has obviously many insecurities. If they're using their leisurely time to gossip about other human beings that way, they really have a lot of things that they could look to from within and stop being envious and jealous and to bring, a different feeling to their heart. And in all of this, guys, their well-being, that those feelings are not very conducive to well-being. Well-being, there's a specific state where you are completely in well-being, and it begins with the nervous system not being in defense mode and being able to be at a sense of ease. So yeah, this part of posture was fascinating because they were explaining it, and I was like, wow, we really do want to pay attention more to our bodies, even more than when we're talking about just bringing neutrality, so you can start relaxing and then evaluating things with that inner growth in mind, following your heart and that neutrality. But even for allocating different experiences from when we were children, because from pre-verbal, they were saying we have pre-verbal context memory. So this is where we'll never necessarily remember that moment. And they give a very interesting example of this, even though it wasn't before the age of 3. So pre-verbal trauma is before the age of 3. It's in the declarative memory, which is limited. So there's no explicit memory forms at all. However, as you pay attention to the procedural memory, so what the body looks like, and then you are asking questions. So with your person, you can pay attention to the body and just choose to start relaxing areas. The example they give is this person who has consistent back pain, and that they get asked by the person, the doctor, practitioner, this psychiatrist or psychologist and university professor starts asking them questions. They're the lecturer in this it's an actual presentation. So it's a conference. This is pre-COVID. And they start saying, okay, where does it feel tense? Like, where does it hurt specifically? So they get the person to focus in on where the tenseness is of their pain. Then they say, okay, now let it take over. Like, let it do what it wants to do. So they walk them through, and then the person starts falling. I'm going to fall. So then the person says, well, wait, I'm going to hold you. And as they're holding them to allow them to actually complete this moment, this person relives a moment when they were at war, where their car there had been a bomb on that car, and all of the team, except for them, who was a doctor, died. And so that was an incomplete defense moment, which is why it's stuck. And this was like, I don't know how many years later. So these examples from doctors are not something that I was like, that's interesting, because I'm certain we've all had these moments where we've had fear, and so we start organizing the body to hold on to that. It's like with my scoliosis, probably there are postures I just started assuming, and it was funny because my twin sister Tina said one of her doctors, or maybe it was the Tao Ying instructor or Tao Chi, they said it's very common for twins to have scoliosis because there's less space. But see, here's where there's different ideas of why, no conclusive answers just yet. At the same time, it's genetic. My mother has it, my grandmother has it, my paternal mother had it, my paternal biological father had it. So for how I see it, it's in the genes kind of thing. But let's just hypothetically say it has to do with, two fetuses in one embryo, or however it is described. It can make sense as well. Either way, the part of how we sit and how we stand and how we walk. Even my osteopath, when I went in and began doing physical therapy for my scoliosis, corrected a specific way. I would not bend my knee and throw my foot in. And I'm sharing this because it's funny. One, my paternal biological grandmother, that's how she walked. But two, it's the scoliosis the way it is. There's this, the leg is a little bit shorter, even though that's normal. Everybody has a bit of a shorter leg and a longer leg. Now, here again, you might be saying, what does this have to do with transcending bad? We cover different aspects, and we're actually trying to focus in a lot on how important the body is. So this aspect of transcending bad and neutrality, you still want to pay attention to the body. Even the word alone will give the body feelings. And so when you're on your own and not tuning into the podcast, that's why the extensive description and example of all this information is to help those who are pursuing inner growth, wanting an empowered ego, to start connecting the body. The body is your nervous system and your brain. So this procedural is important to make clear. And I've been thinking that I might, depending on the time as always, because I really do want to get the inner growth program online, but I might try and create something specific with the new information, because the minute you can start paying attention, well, again, after this episode already, for the community, you'll be doing that. I just alone, when I finished this series yesterday, I was like, wait, my back, because even though I do have scoliosis, I'm pretty sure there's a specific way I sit that then exasperates, because by the end of the day, my back hurts in a specific spot. And as I concentrated, I was able to relax that. It's important to remember we're not just mind, we're not just heart, we're also body. They all go together. Transcending bad with neutrality heals and allows for expansion, because you're actually moving beyond the way you're thinking. Consciousness. Human beings evolve consciously. The thought form. It's not only the information. In fact, the information is where people stay stuck in their own little societal group. Our community doesn't stay stuck. The community that wants to stay stuck and they have their ego base and ego mind spiritual leaders, we are transcending. We're all information. And this is not about clinging to one piece. In fact, it's about empowering ourselves to know that questioning, curiosity, and then feeling a sense of security, not cognitive dissonance, is what you will look to achieve once you get to the impartiality place of the advanced place in the inner growth program. Is when you know that the ego of you is finally empowered. You're finally not reacting with societal engagement, your first nervous system's response. And you're finally actually in a state of consciousness about you reacting because of ego, without judging you or the external, good or bad. The people that I was with, as they gossiped, I don't condone it, I don't agree with it, but it's not, I don't judge it. I don't condone it, quote unquote, because, I was taught not to. One. At the end of the day, in fact, is it bad? No, they're not really telling the people how they feel. And if anything, it's indicative of their insecurities. But all of these eventually become irrelevant, meaning they're not your life. You are coexisting. This is true empowered ego. You don't judge people. And true empowered ego from a place of unconditional love and respect for every person's journey. And this is where it goes to the unknown elements of life. That's where you're transcending duality and all belief systems. And you are simply allowing you to know we exist. And to know is to feel. Establishing how you're going to be dealing with other people, and it is based on your environment. By the age of 7, you start getting out of other children the reactions you want from them, are reactions you've experienced at home, and that you will replicate. Now, here's where those who are empowered individuals, they are not in fear, meaning that there's nothing that you need to, discover or not discover. And what I mean by that is, now that you have the data point, like, okay, when I'm interacting with people, if I pay attention to what reaction is coming my way, I will be able to go within and then decide, okay, what do I want to do? Is this the reaction that I want? Are these the relationships that I want? Without any blame or guilt. This is why the body is so important, so that you understand. And it's the same way these practitioners, oh my God, I love them. I love them because they are making a difference. And like they said, when you help to heal someone, you're helping the entire world to heal. And by helping practitioners to understand the way that the nervous system, so they said, they don't judge any of their patients. Their body was doing what their body needed to do to defend themselves when they were infants and children, and then going through some traumatic experience. And this is the part that warms my heart, because one day they will be a majority. And at that point, even though I already know it's not going to be perfect, meaning there's always that societal engagement, for now at least, because I believe before we get to all egos being empowered, there's a necessity of a specific type of conversation by those experts, with the now an empowerment in the forefront of the majority. And right now I don't see that. I see ego-based and ego-spiritual based leaders helping ego groups. And that's where, remembering that we all evolve in different moments, in different spaces, this is where I know this is that space. Consciousness, we're energy in motion, we interact. And so here, oneness, we are one. However, if we were one, meaning we vibrated, we were the one same megahertz, all of us, I would say that we would not be able to experience each other. Conceptually speaking, this is a concept, so that's definitely not part of the tangible aspects. Getting back to the tangible aspects, what I was trying to achieve was the visibility. Now I lost my train of thought. Oh gosh, there was a specific point I was trying to make. Well, moving on. So the remembering of experiences that impacted your life, very important. Allowing yourself to be in neutrality, very important. Allowing yourself to organize the bad in a way that says, yes, there are things that I think of as bad or good, and then to allow yourself to transcend that with the external, but also yourself, is a step-to-step process. Now, the implicit memory would be emotional and procedural, as I was saying. And so the emotional, they're saying it's like memories that come out of the blue. So let's say that, there was a moment in your life where something happened and you got scared, and it comes up through a smell, or you eat, ice cream and you start getting sweating, afraid. I mean, I know I've had some time those moments where, a specific incident triggered a specific reaction. We all have those. So those are emotional memories. If you allow yourself the time to sit with it, this is where you don't need the external to tell you how to live your life. Some people will want the external, others will be able to say, yeah, okay, I got it, because you believe enough in love for self, but also humanity. So identifying fear, I was talking about leadership, identifying the fear that is present in all is what is not visible, and therefore they're not achieving a presence of now and presenting the information with now. But the majority, so the mass, as we achieve more information, is gaining a place of knowledge with behavior. The thing is, by labeling, that's what it's trying to get at, is going to create the societal engagement, the proof for the eyes. And so this is where those who still within their journey in life will continue to seek, as they did as infants outside of them, they will follow those types of experts, those types of coaches and mentors and information. They will always want to be told what to do, and they will also most likely always think of there is no transcending bad, because bad exists and good exists, and they don't transcend the duality into neutrality. So this is not good or bad, but their body will respond with cognitive dissonance to any new information that contradicts whatever their founding information is. And they don't say, okay, wait, here's the unknown elements of life, and in here, this is what I have as my belief system, X, Y, B, C, D, E, F, G. For me, for example, in the unknown elements of life, I have that there's an infinite array of information that explains exactly why people do what they do, that we have systems that are built in time and go through their own transformation, and that people will follow that because there's the automatic societal engagement of the nervous system's response. So the mass will continue to exist. Leadership is made by people. So as long as there are insecure egos, there will be insecure leaders who will continue to be in a space of battling between each other when new information is found. But there will also be that portion, since they exist, of leaders that are the mediators and the ones that bring the two together. They may not stand out, but they will be the one making the true change, as those of us who inspire human potential, those of us who pursue inner growth, follow our heart, and are actually empowered egos, and therefore we're not imposing truths on others. We are listening and supporting each other in whatever space of evolution we are. So this guru that I was talking to about, who is supposed to be, wise, and he's not the only one. There's a couple other that I'm thinking of. So their breakdown of sharing information when somebody's not ready, it's bad. I got it because from a subconscious level, that person's not ready to deal with their hurt. And in fact, in yesterday's episode, by the way, there's a specific way that was developed by one of the professors. It's called SIBAM, SIBAM. Wait a minute, I wrote down what it means, guys. So it's about allowing a person to go through being able to, it's gradual piecing together of these traumatic moments, because the body otherwise, again, it will be overwhelmed. And so it's creating a relationship with your body. It's about the voice and the tone. It's about breathing. Paying attention to all these aspects of yourself can help you to know and get to know your procedural emotional layer or memory layer, okay? The color of your face, your thought process. These are all those pre-verbal cues that you can pick up on for yourself and that you can work with. And the pacing is, of course, important. So procedural, they're saying motor learning memories. So it's like riding a bike. It's automatic. That's why the posture is important. And you already know what type of parents you had. I had a very loving and very free mother. So this is why I was always able to express myself. And in time, I achieved my own balance, my own unique balance, because she never forced me to fall within any type of category. Once I got to my adult age, she's like, what's going on here? There's where her thoughts became more, where she'd share them more, and it is different than mine. It's more in accordance to societal norms, and yet she's also a rebel. But see, all people, again, we have the societal engagement. There's ego-based knowledge that you have that is part of your upbringing, which is why it's important to remember anytime you're reacting with non-flow to any type of information, you're creating a defense mode from your ego. You're thinking you're right, or even if you're not thinking you're right, you're reacting to something as if it were bad without even being aware, because nobody says to you, don't get a hissy fit, don't get angry and upset. They're saying it's normal to get upset. It's part of being a human being. It's part of, yes, an emotion that we have, but that emotion is coming because your ego is defending itself. You need to defend your opinion. So here's where this is supportive of those who truly want to be somebody who can say, I am a confident person. And I say truly because a truly confident person doesn't have a nervous system that is going to react defensively. So once you learn that the layer of being a human being is the mind, is the heart, and the body, you're going to understand that you can say from your mind that you're confident. Your emotions will show that at a certain point, and then your body will as well. And your body and emotions kind of go together. So when I, for example, I'll use me, would think of, okay, these people are bad because the society told me to label those who did any type of drugs. Plus I wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted to work in the system because I was seeing the system as the right to allow humanity to be in a good place. And again, the system serves its purpose, but it doesn't allow the with knowledge that will change, and we always are voicing things that are important to us. So even here, neutrality is important, and there is no judgment. Even when I uncovered the injustice, I understood the mechanism. I'm trying to share, like, I didn't say, oh, I'm gonna fight the system, I'm gonna dismantle it, because here's the thing: once you know, and when you always know, the ego's involved, and meaning we all have it, which has always been very clear to me, plus the subconscious. When I would say peace, it didn't mean everybody thinks the exact same thing. That's ridiculous, not to mention we're all our own unique people. That's the other part of that ego, wanting to be special. Even these same experts, gurus, the spiritual gurus, they're not experts, were using something along the lines of, the person needing to feel special. And so, like, somebody says I'm stupid, but they'll go and say I'm really stupid, and the opposite, somebody says I'm really good, like the way to make it even more that you are that much more special. Yeah, because ego's there. Because when you're a kid, you wanted the sense of security, and that translated eventually to what you could feel proud about, because they taught you about the word proud. And then this is that place of direction that they were talking about, right? So from episodic memory, that autobiographical, and whatever you've been taught, you're going to replicate the experiences in your previous environment. So it's natural for you to have always a foundation of human elements. This is why, if you allow you to get to know you, body, mind, and heart, and you allow you to know the ego's there, and so this doesn't mean you'll ever be not in a space of having preferences. I won't ever say, hey, great job, somebody who's going to go and destroy somebody else's life. No, I don't judge them as good or bad. That's how you transcend the bad with neutrality. And here's the healing, because you're not hurt or defending, you're not in fear place. And expansion, because you're actually not judging, you're thinking outside the box, and really what you're allowing is for the moment to be the moment, and for things to be what they are. And that's why in the unknown elements of life, you have grown from your own consciousness, neutrality with the unknown, versus the fear that so many leadership still have and don't recognize when they're coming forth with information. Not all, again, there are those who do, and when they are in that space, they're empowering the individual, and they're leaving open-ended, meaning they're not claiming what they know as the one truth. They're claiming what they know, and they're trying to show how it can support and help, because their intent is to contribute. And so what they're really trying to do is, how can I contribute and speak with all of these different ego-based people, because they know that all of those ego-based people, what they're voicing is important to their ego. That's their cognitive dissonance for a reason. If the new information hurts, it's because it's part of their heritage. It's like, well, I remember when we learned in my world religions class how all of the pagan holidays are pretty much what then the Christians ended up following. And as a Catholic, I know, I mean, there can't be denying certain things. It makes me laugh when, well, and not laugh in a humorous way, because here it's cognitive dissonance again. It is the ego and the group not recognizing that just because a piece of information that is new says, hey, this is the story, it's not negating anything. But that's where they're not secure, they're not confident in their truth. If they were, they wouldn't need to prove it. But then again, they know that society exists, and it's a whole, in fact, it's all in, that's where the mind is the only aspect. They're simply having a debate, and they're forgetting about the essence. Jesus stuck to all the hearts that still talk about Jesus, even though they don't go and talk about the religious institution. So the 5D person is neutral towards all religions, and in fact, they're probably most likely not using the Christ consciousness to talk about ascension. The ones who are more likely to use that are those in the 4D space. And in fact, there are very specific tales that I've witnessed from individuals who are leadership. And by tales, what I mean is they've done the same duality dynamic, invoking and talking about darkness and light, talking about Lucifer and angels and all of that. And here's where that's their speaking is for their community, and it's a community that thinks of things in those ways. So the 5D person, that's the one who's going to acknowledge that and transcend that. And it's not good or bad. They transcend and they speak in ways that can communicate what needs to be communicated to bring everybody together. The part of bad keeps you stuck. As always, anything that's non-flowing keeps you quote-unquote stuck. So here, getting back to the spiritual leaders that are in the space of, talking about enlightenment in this way of don't give too much information because otherwise it's bad. Yes, subconsciously speaking, the person is not ready to bring the hurt to the forefront. That's exactly why any smart and like these neuroscientists, psychiatrists, they're professors again, know because of the knowledge they have of the body, there has to be a process that is slow, and you want to base it on what you're getting, the inputs you get from the person. Here's where it's not hard to understand inputs when you're not driving your relationships with your own ego, but instead you are sharing, you are coexisting. The bad, there is no bad if you are enlightened, spiritually speaking, and or even with the science speaking from the level of infinite knowledge. And I say that because this is the space, that bad has a specific allocation for the person you're talking to. It's subjective, based on their accumulation of valid data points. Now, if you are a person who starts to get to know yourself and you're always pursuing inner growth when non-flow comes about, you're going to achieve eventually impartiality. And from that moment forth, you're going to get to decide what you want to do next. Some people are going to stay and wanting to think they're going to fight for justice, and that's where you're going to stay with your set belief systems, because you're going to say, no, there's a bad and a good, and I will cast that stone. It doesn't matter in however many shape, way, or form. If you're going to stay in that space, that's how you're going to continue to feel and evaluate information. You may be open to all information, but your body will respond with a defense mechanism, which automatically means your brain's not listening. When you have an opinion and somebody's speaking to you, you're not listening. If you are listening, it means you're not having an opinion. Your heart is open, your mind is open, your body's relaxed. Your attention and attentiveness is to the exact words, the exact energy, the exact everything of that human being without any judgment, condemnation. There's no word. Bad is not there. When that person was basically asking, I was not confused, but the first question is like, okay, they're curious. The second question, I'm like, okay, they're really curious. As they started, still asking, I was like, okay, they really feel, they're not comfortable, but they weren't upset about it either. They just were, like I've expressed to you more than once, they're like, what? They just couldn't wrap their head around it. No time was I judging the person. Obviously, to me personally, intellectually speaking, that is a closed-minded individual. But guys, do you know how many of those I have? This is the whole point. I battle still to this day with all of my loved ones, for the most part, about the unconditional love that humanity holds and the higher infinite human potential of every person in their given state, as they are. This is the thing. So when the spiritual leaders are saying it's bad to share information with those who are not ready, yeah, because their subconscious is totally not ready. They're totally in fear. Their ego is like that child. And that's why with those empath friends, I do not condone that 4D. I will condone more of a 3D, because at least the person will acknowledge they have, like the man who said, maybe it's because I'm ignorant, but I will still always judge humans in good and evil. But at least he had the decency with himself to say, I didn't go to college. I only have middle school. And so maybe, it's my upbringing. That is awareness. And this is key because this is where you have an actual exchange of information with people. That's what life is about. It's not about, the person who might claim to be enlightened but then goes around telling people what to do is not more enlightened than the individual who at least acknowledges, I understand what you're saying, but here's where I'm coming from. Because that person meant no disrespect. In fact, their exchange with me was on the same level. They appreciated it, and we both agreed to disagree. That is a mature ego exchange right there. And that's when a person is more empowered than not. Versus the young lady who started badgering and then said, oh, well, I guess this served no time for either of us, which made me kind of laugh because, if you have that much of a conversation with somebody and then you conclude that it served nothing, well, what a waste of time did you just use for your life? For me, it wasn't a waste of time because I enjoy listening to others' perspectives, and that's what I told her. So again, no judgment. Preference? Heck, no, I don't prefer being around them because it's intellectually stifling. But again, they're not the only ones. So they may be of a specific caliber, but they're no different than the empath friends who come and say, oh, but I know exactly what's happening here. And then they go and instigate people and they prick at their hurts. And then they come back and say, but that person was rude. That person was mean. They're flying, fleeing away, and a lot of other things. Again, it's not that I was not necessarily in that space because that was the information that was being given to me, especially as I started seeing and learning more of that spirituality community. But there's a space of empowerment that was always present, and that not casting the other stone. So respecting and knowing that every person has their journey. Because this came with me as a person, but with God and Jesus, and with my mother telling me, mind your own business, do you, others do them. And this is where it stands to this day in a complete space of, there's a known, there's an unknown element of life. So when the spiritual leaders, though, they say it's bad, versus acknowledge that that person is perhaps has chosen that's how they want to become enlightened. So here's the interesting part. Once you transcend all information, and so everything becomes added. When we look at the ascension community, I don't want to get into that too much here for now. I'd rather keep those for the videos. But when we get to those spaces, there's a lot of belief that is still given between the Christ consciousness and angels and demons and alien species and all of that. So this is where, when we instead look at it from the cosmic consciousness, and so the brain composition, secondary and primary consciousness, and this nervous system's response, the ego in defense mode and cognitive dissonance, it becomes quite clear that there's trauma. There's trauma, there's identity, and there's a societal system that you live with. So here's where it's normal, like the woman and the way they reacted. They have a very specific type of environment. I think the right word would be bourgeois. They're like bourgeois people. In Italian, it means something different. So this type of people, they are basically described as people who kind of middle class, like in America, but different. They came into a certain level of wealth, so to speak, so they have a good lifestyle, but they're thinking in ways that are very clear. They would want more. Like they want to act as if they were rich. So they want status. Status is important to them. Society is important. So all the things on the outside. This is very 3D, okay? The part that they were gossiping made me think of teenage years, but this is where there's adults that gossip in any country. So the person who is gossiping is an ego that is definitely competing with other egos. They stay in a specific mindset. Now their environment, when you go and look at their family, there's very specific, again, elements that you can pinpoint. And this is where I don't mean to generalize at all. The stereotypes, as we know, they're pieces of information that can help us for our inner growth. but they're also pieces of information that allow us, as we're coexisting with people, to pinpoint things. But the thing is, they're all vibration too. There's a specific feeling that comes from the ego when it's insecure. And so when somebody is gossiping, when somebody is spiteful, when somebody is vengeful, when somebody is envious, when somebody does something, and for those of you who are at the space of neutrality at this point, you've transcended bad completely like you can pinpoint every one of these that I just mentioned. And I'm going to use my friend's story in a minute to continue, because here's where the external from 3D, 4D is always going to use labels to define your experiences. You're the one who's not using the labels. You're the one who's transcended the bad with neutrality. Now, even when I get on the podcast to talk, I know that some people are going to follow to a T. And that's because the message resonates. So they're inclined to be in neutrality with themselves and humanity. I also know there are some that are like, well, I don't know about that. And that's where, again, it's important for you to identify that for you. I'm not here to say what to be. I'm here to say, pursue your inner growth. Follow your heart. And know that when you're in a space of, I don't know about this, and let's say it's anger or like, she's stupid. Let's just say that, okay? That's a defense. That's a complete defense reaction. It means there's something important in that concept from your childhood, from your family. So here's where these same people, why did the person react to what I was saying? Because to them, the justice is to put people in prison. Justice is to keep labeling those human beings as evil and monsters and people that should not live or exist on earth. And that's what I know exactly what that is. Again, I'm a political science major, and I used to think of justice in a specific way, but my heart, it never resonated with that in the true sense, which is why that part of shame of, wow, I actually followed this for some time is still present, because my heart is actually and has always been with the ego of every human. And not in a way that makes me sad. I'm not sad for any person. Every person is where they're meant to be. That truth has always spoken to me too. God makes you the way you're meant to be. So this is why when I say the spiritual leaders, I'm always more and more surprised by those who are defined leaders and experts in their lack of insight. But I recognize at this point, and especially with the nervous system's response and the awareness of the unknown elements of life, and that body immediately reacting with cognitive dissonance. So these people immediately going to the past and all of their environment and information without recognizing it. This is the thing. Like the man when he said, I only have a middle school degree, so maybe it's my ignorance, but I cannot bring myself to think of this in this way. But I understand that you went to college and you know psychology and you know this, so maybe. They were so humble and neutral and honest. This is a person who has awareness of self and who is empowered, because information that is different from their belief, their way of judging humanity and the species, is not something that instigated them to get aggressive. Unlike the one guy from Sardinia who began he had some major, who knows what the heck happened to him. Like, that's what I wanted to ask, but obviously I wasn't about to ask that. But what I was like, did somebody break his heart? Did they ruin his business? Like, what did they do to him to make this person so, wow, like so almost, like I told you guys, it was so, I just knew I needed to stop this person from speaking immediately, because it was, not going to get to any better place. Energy is what we are. And so these words, you don't stop at them. Those of you who have transcended the whole bad with neutrality, it's a concept, and you're experiencing it. And this is where you pursue expansion. So you're able to gauge where and when and what is appropriate or not. In this circumstance, the one with the lady, I wasn't the one who introduced the topic. The friend was the one. But the friend likes to get a rise out of situations, because the friend likes to be the person who brings new people. They like the attention. They see, these are all things that if you allow yourself to get beyond the bad and you truly listen and you're not judging, that's the part of your expansion. See, I love humanity, And I've always loved understanding why people do what they do. So for me, engaging with any human being is fascinating. And while they're engaging with me, from the minute they begin, I can test and sense their ego. And so the minute they begin, I can immediately sense where they're at with the information. Now, the part of getting to know somebody, that's a very different thing. And in fact, that from my longtime friends has proven, the one friend that we're going to talk about in a minute, that I didn't talk to for 5 years. And here again, if you get a 3D person, which I've gone before, to them, if there's no dialogue, then those relationships are over. For the 4D community, there's spiritual family, spiritual groups, a soul family, soulmates, twin flames. And in fact, here's where the kicker, which I'm not going to go into extensively, but there's a specific level of insight that I have on all of those aspects as well. And here's where I also see those who have not transcended, and so their insight is limited. They have still more room that they could uncover. But again, every person's in their own space, and not good or bad. So you get to gauge where the fear is and try to avoid instigating the fear, because the fear is where the hurt lies, and that doesn't heal. So the same way these neuroscientists, they have this CBAM, SIBAM, slow always wins. So it's about allowing a person to slowly get through and get to know all of their memories. That's the thing that people though, and so the same spiritual leaders, they're talking at a certain point about compassion and how it's from the ego when it's excessive. And so they were speaking wisdom, meaning a truly enlightened human knows that there's a space for everyone. That's where they don't impose. And you're not compassionate in this way of sad, or, I mean, the way they were describing it was overly. Obviously, there's always balance. And here again, it's about more than anything, when you get to certain spaces emotionally, to say, okay, where am I? Why am I here? And to explore it. That's the beauty of pursuing inner growth, is that you create a relationship with the layers of you that are always a part of your day-to-day, and you didn't have the opportunity as an infant. That's the whole point. As a child, we may begin to see that this opportunity would be given as the system learns about the neuroscience, learns about things such as let us work in specific ways so that people can gain knowledge of their body, of their emotion, of their mind, of these memories, the semantic, the episodic, the emotional, the procedural. Because see, even though one would say it's common sense, did you ever think that it was a memory? Like when something, a smell of whatever, and you have a memory of that moment. And here's where they even described in the same episode, we have a lot of different emotional memories. And unfortunately, they're saying, even though we have beautiful ones, it's the traumatic ones that stick around. And it's true, because your nervous system learned to defend itself. The flight-fight response was organized from your 0 to 2 years of age. And so here's where I love that I never pursued psychology, and that I'm not teaching or doing some type of counseling in that way. I'm happy to mentor with that inner growth and the consciousness and inspiring higher human potential, because breaking things down in a day-to-day manner is what's going to help all people to know things. Those of you who are in the community, those of you who want to empower your person and others. And that's what creates more unconditionally loving human beings, because it is the ego that's still reacting with the sissy fit, with the quote unquote, the sissy fit. Where did that expression come from? I need to look it up. But it's not to mean in any way judgmental, because see, this is where words, I use them. One, it's the expression that came to mind, but there is not a negative. Even though I know that there's the personalization, but I don't mean it in a negative is what I'm trying to say. I mean it in a loving way, and I mean it in an expression way. So forgive me for anybody who, might not like that expression, and I will look into it, just because now I'm curious, like, where did it come from? But hopefully It's something that I've heard before, is what I'm trying to say. Getting to know you will achieve a specific relationship with the body, the heart, and mind. And as you allow to transcend the bad with your person, but with humanity as well, you get to learn those defense mechanisms that are connected to the human elements, to the essence of you elements, to the unknown of life elements. Example, the word, and somebody potentially taking it personally. The minute I'm saying I don't mean it that way is the minute they should be like, okay, she doesn't mean it that way, And the minute, though, maybe instead it's like, well, I still am going to judge her because I don't, appreciate it. That's where, right there, that's something very strong. There's a very important memory, a very important and personal situation. And so, that's the part that the person who wants to empower and who's going to achieve neutrality, you transcend the bad with neutrality. You say, wait a minute, she didn't say anything. She used a couple of words. It's an expression. Why am I so upset? Wait a minute, let me think. This is why. When it comes to leadership, example, the part, there are times where I get very fired up. It's because it hurt my feelings when I found out that they were not doing what was right for all people, that they were not speaking of unconditional love, that they were definitely casting the stone, and that there is a whole bunch of not fairness going on, like everywhere and everything. And then that, our entire life is put at danger because leaders can't get their act together. So like every day, our precious life needs to be in the hands of people that are reacting same way as any other human being. Like, see, this is where it's like, don't get me going. And here's where I know that every time that happens, I get to work with neutrality, because there's no need for my body to get into that state. But I also know why. I'm transcending the bad with neutrality. And people who stay with the labels will do and say other things about these types of conversations, guys. They're going to say you're creating excuses. You're going to say you're a hypocrite. They're going to say you're closed-minded, delusional, not realistic. There's a lot of different opinions that come from those who stick to their specific truths, okay? It is up to you to pay attention to your lovely body, because here's where it gets very beautiful as you achieve empowerment. And let's say that you do enjoy human behavioral exchanges, and you're somebody who also wants to help people, right? So you're also looking to support the ego empowerment of other individuals. By being able to interact with love, one, you share with them that it's okay to be themselves, which is the first thing the ego wants. The need to feel special is because the ego wants to be special. The friends that gossip, they have insecurities. The one friend who needed to create a scenario, they wanted the attention to be focused, and then they wanted to have scenarios again to be able to talk about other people. Beyond that, that's their way of doing things. Staying in the whole bad or good would not allow you to enjoy the experience of meeting different people, which doesn't change essentially anything, except for then you're limited with your experiences. Now, the person who remains judgmental, but that's none of us, none of the community who's tuning in and who's still listening, if you're new, is in this place of duality. Because this entire conversation would not be of interest to you. Maybe the neuroscience part, but all the other conceptual aspects is not something that, makes your heart sing, basically. But to the friend, when I was telling you guys yesterday the whole story, so the friend, for example, definitely does not transcend bad in neutrality. They have chosen to stay within the specific realm of duality on purpose. They've acknowledged that. Now, see, even if you acknowledge I'm going to limit myself because I don't want to trust in my inner guidance system to the point of where I say, okay, unknown elements of life, I'm going to transcend any belief. So any personalization, all of it, guys, that's where you gain impartiality. You're going to stop judging anything and everything. And if you take something, like I said, with the leadership, I know exactly where it's coming from. And I don't justify it, and I don't condone it, and I don't allow it to get to the space. I actually always say, wait a minute, let's reestablish what we know. Every person and the world itself is where it's meant to be. All the leaders serve people. It has nothing to do with you. It's not about our ego. See, egocentric right here. The world is bigger than just one of us, and then just one of the ego groups. And so here's where it's like, that's personal, Maria. That's all. Put it aside. It has nothing to do with the inner growth of an individual or following our heart. It's your part. And you put it to the side and you continue an expanded conversation. But you also continue an expanded conversation on the topic for your person. Because you say, okay, here's some more love to this. We know what it was. You don't just let it go away. You review it, you remember, and then you apply the new feeling you learned that you chose on your own that you want to bring. And this is where the body is also, you're putting it at ease. So all of these things together, you can always do at any given moment of time if you're acknowledging that any reaction, doesn't matter to what extent, is in your power to manage. One of the things they were saying about memory, the different memories, and a way to work through, like flashbacks is what they gave, it is to present to the person what their body is already doing to defend themselves as a positive, to show them that they have a way that they were already fighting to defend. And that's why when I was saying they don't define any human being as bad or good, these people, I know it. Not only their patients, but all of humanity. The way they're talking about everything yesterday was very clear. So they are saying, if you allow the patient, because they're talking to other clinicians as well, to become aware of the body movement that they're doing, and that body movement is their resource. This is where they're to identify the resource the person created to defend themselves, and that's where you transform it from good to bad, from bad to good, for them. So you retrain the stimuli. So this is where they're saying the way that you can help a person to rework their procedural memory particularly, but we can associate it to any memory, is to build their resources. So your resources, you want to build them in a specific way, and being able to recognize, okay, how do you see the environment outside of you, and how do you feel about the environment inside? And so to seek out happy things, and to inside feel good things. But even if let's say you don't feel good things, to feel the less bad things, and then to say, okay, wait there, then to slowly try and find the good feelings. This is where if it's you that wants, you can always achieve focus on pleasurable things inside and outside, because your mind is yours. And here's where people choose to stay in those reflected thought processes, those neural pathways, those ways of thinking, that sharp knife, without you wielding it. You're allowing your 0 to 2 years of age fight response to stay as is. The 3 years on, you began from 3 years on knowing about desire was the 14-18 months. 3 years on is where the rational brain hemisphere begins to develop. By 4 years, you're having magical thinking still. That's until about 7 years. And so essentially you begin having certain types of ways you're thinking, but remember, you learned how to behave with others by the time you're 12 months. By the time you're a year old, and you're going to instigate the same reactions from others outside of you by the time you're 7 from what you're used to. You're taught that. No, it's only first you paying attention to it, and then you consciously choosing what you want, which is where the direction, if it's been taken away from you, doesn't mean you can't reestablish it. This is the whole point. You totally can, the minute you understand that this is a mechanism of the body. Your body was defending. Your body meaning your brain, your nervous system. So here, there are resources besides these stimuli from the inside and outside world. And so this is using the power of your mind and your heart. The part about your survival skill. So the body, they're explaining this very specific move somebody was doing as they were telling their trauma experience, and they were saying, even if somebody has a disassociation during that moment, if you allow them to get their mind focused on what they're doing, that can help them shift the focus to the now, and then you shift it to what resource. And so the hand gesture was one of trying to express the frustration. And here's where it's not about staying in that. is about expanding to the next space. The expansion is up to you. So that's why I was saying I'm happy I didn't go down the path of clinician, because clinician works with those individuals who, I don't know for how long, because I do believe that the empowerment of the inclined empowered person will always come forth. There are those who will always have societal engagement as the lead, not good or bad, but I have a couple people I'm thinking of who definitely seem to stick to that checklist. Okay, so they need to see what can happen, and once they see that somebody maybe who has the same condition they have, who went through the same journey they have, once they find that ego mind and or ego spiritual based leader, because that's what that is, once they find that, then they'll know it's possible for them because they saw it outside of themselves. Those who are more inclined to be their own person, the ego empowered individual is the one who will know immediately, and really you'll be challenged immediately to say, there is no end to what I can achieve. I will always look to achieve it. So you commit. That's what you do. You commit to achieving that. And the commitment is really a commitment to achieving your sense of expression. Now, commitment, not in battle format, okay, guys? Very different. Commitment to well-being, to being yourself, there's a sense of ease. If your nervous system is tense, you're not at ease. The at ease is an actual state that you feel when you're finally comfortable to be you in the world outside of you. This is the 5D space. That's why it's unconditional love and light. When I get tense, it's when I'm talking a little bit about the leadership that you guys know I'm working about. When I talk a little bit about the people who are in that 3D, 4D space. So while I'm talking to you right now, I pay attention to the body. And it is practicing to bring your body to a relaxed state continuously. Nothing impedes you from doing that. As you can tell, I have 2-hour, 1-hour conversations with you guys about topics. While I'm doing that, I have some awareness. It's your life. There is no race. There's no, dead end or, end game here. Every day is a new day. And every day, if you practice a sense of ease, however many times you're able to with your entire body, and then you say, okay, lovely mind and heart, I want to expand the way I'm evaluating something, not because you're saying somebody else is right or wrong, because you understand that that's how you're going to allow yourself to think outside the box, because it feels better to feel free to explore. Now, the people who are afraid, meaning, I don't know about it, they're the ones who want the firm hand. So they want the labels, the boxes, the checklists. They want the proof. Those people are not tuning in today. And if they are, they won't tune in anymore because there's not this firm hand. I'm saying you can do this even without me. And I'm sharing information though, and a mindset and a journey that can support. But that's the point. It's not ever you don't need anyone except for yourself, because your heart has everything you need. Your ego has everything you need. All the reactions you have is everything you need. All you need to do though is pay attention to it versus continue to stay in the same repetitive situations with the external. So when they're saying, a hand gesture is something to be seen as positive, I think of those people who have like a bad reaction response, and let's say they answer people negatively. There are those, like the one person that I'm not really talking to anymore, but they recognize that they will do at a certain point something to be spiteful. Now, see, they don't try to change that. They simply have acknowledged it. Now, if they'd acknowledge it with themselves with neutrality, but they haven't acknowledged that humanity is not evil. They haven't acknowledged a lot of areas that could be transcending the bad with neutrality, which would allow healing and their expansion to take place. They're the ones who have the ambivalent attachment though. And as we learned yesterday, that is where they go from one extreme to another. Like they're very inconsistent. So one day they'll be around you all day. Next day they'll ignore you completely. Next day they'll be and want your attention. And the minute you say, no, I can't, is the minute they'll be like, oh, see, you're not there for me then. And they will enter their own mindset their own thoughts, which is where this person, it's always about them not being good enough, them being negative, and them not being lovable, and then maybe them not being, it's a very, very, non-loving towards the person. And it is fascinating because there are 5 of them. They're the third child, but apparently all the other sisters, they're all female, I believe, get along with the parents great. However, remember, the minute we're born, and even before that, in pregnancy, the cortisol levels of a mother affects the child. So if there's a high level of cortisol, we learn that the child will be born with, they'll be anxious, they'll be always in alert. Like, it actually changes the way the amygdala, I believe, the seat of the fear and anger is. And so that's something that if a person started learning more about their body, but in a way that's not too annoying, too academic, because that's the thing, not everybody wants to learn about it, which is why I try to make it very light and easy. Plus, you can always go research more, but to break it down, that way, it's a mechanism. Like, there isn't something to blame, because we think only of that ego with the subconscious and conscious. And so again, transcending the bad is about you first doing that with you, but there is a requirement of the external, because otherwise you're doing still a battle with what you're experiencing, and you're not allowing a sense of ease to take place more and more and more, which isn't going to allow healing and that expansion. And it says always trying to allow that inner growth to be the potential you achieve after every episode, besides following your heart. There's little reminders here and there. So this individual, though, the ambivalent, I don't know where and why. Either way, they acknowledge that they do this thing, but they have not tried to stop. The reason they have not tried to stop is because they justify their needs by saying, but I'm human. Of course I want to be loved. But I'm human. Of course I want to share with humanity. And this is where the sociologists would come into play, and those who have criticized psychology as being destructive towards sociology, like towards societal groups, because they have in their best interest the individual. And it made me laugh when I read that, because of these people, again, leadership. So I laugh because I'm like, you're an average quote unquote sheep, if anything, who's got a title and who is now leading people to follow you, and who's basically saying, psychologists, they're ruining society. It's one person, of course. So again, we have a diversity, but the part of leadership, that is that word. We're all leaders. We're all special. We're all equal. We're all humans. We all have value. That's where my heart is and has always been. This is why. And see, here's another tidbit, just so you guys see that this is that aspect of emotional and procedural memory that I know for a fact I've had since I was a child, just because of the way my mother describes how I was. But it's never sat well with me that I was not listened to as a child. That's the only reason I wanted to grow up. It was not because I wanted to be older like other people. I just wanted to stop being told what to do with my life and how I was feeling, or just stop being ignored. And it was funny because once I turned 18, that didn't really change. I was still too young. There's very specific feelings that come about, and I know where they're from. And as you can hear from my tone, they're not expressed in any specific way. They're not good, they're not bad. When